When a wealthy teen mocked his teacher with a cruel joke, he expected applause. What he got instead was a silent lesson that hit harder than any punishment. He thought it was just a joke. What she handed him was something that would change his life. Laughter echoed from the back of the classroom. Loud, mocking, and far too casual for someone barely a week into school. Ms. Nain Caldwell froze, mid-sentence. Chalk paused against the board. The voice belonged to Preston Kavanaugh, 16, lounging like royalty in a $300 hoodie, arms crossed as if the school belonged to his father. A few students chuckled, not because it was funny, but because it was Preston, rich, white, smug, and used to people laughing on cue. He raised his voice and mocked her accent in a cartoonish drawl, ending with a twisted line about picking cotton. He laughed like he'd just won a comedy show. A couple of kids laughed again, this time uneasy. Ms. Caldwell didn't flinch. She stood still, her eyes blazing, not with anger, but with something deeper. The class fell silent. No yelling, no threats, just quiet power. She turned, walked to her desk, picked up a notebook, clicked her pen, and said, "Preston." His name floated like a feather but hit like a brick. "You'll be staying after class today." He smirked. "What for?" She offered a small smile. "To begin your assignment." Confused glances flew around. There was no known assignment. But her voice didn't ask for attention. It demanded it. Preston shrugged, though his voice cracked slightly. 10 minutes later, the bell rang. Backpacks zipped. Shoes squeaked. Eyes were everywhere, except on Preston. He sat still, waiting for the scolding, for the punishment. Instead, she slid a plain manila folder across the desk. No labels. Just worn paper. "Open it at home. And tomorrow, bring your answer." He squinted. "Answer to what?" She didn't blink. "Whether you want to keep pretending, or learn something real." He chuckled. "Lady, I've seen real. Been to 3 schools in a year." "You've seen money," she replied calmly. "Not truth." The folder lay between them, buzzing like a wire. He didn't touch it, just stared. She didn't move. And for once, Preston had nothing to say. That night, he tossed the folder on his marble desk, ignored it while scrolling his phone under a 75-inch TV. But by midnight, he was pacing, not from fear, or so he claimed. He just couldn't stop thinking about her calm, her control. He'd seen teachers cry, shout, crumble. Ms. Caldwell? She didn't even blink. That annoyed him. The next day, he arrived early. Not to talk. Not to apologize. Just to observe. Students treated her like a celebrity. Fist bumps, grins, nods. Not out of fear, but respect, came back ready to test her again. But this time, she didn't even look his way. What followed was a silent lesson that took him far from the classroom. Into a truth he wasn't ready for. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't call his name. But somehow, she had his full attention, and it scared him more than any punishment ever could. He sat in the back again, arms crossed like always. But this time, she didn't call on him. Didn't glare. Didn't even glance his way. Ms. Caldwell just kept teaching like he wasn't even there, like he was just another forgotten desk. And the strange part? The lesson wasn't boring. They were reading The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, but she wasn't just reciting text. She was pulling the pages apart, revealing the people, the pain, the power behind the words. Preston watched the class lean in, especially one kid, Jerome, he thought, completely locked in. That's when Preston realized this wasn't just a class. It was her domain. Her rules. And somehow, without shouting or showboating, she owned it. Ran it. Like a queen in a silent kingdom. He stayed after class again. The folder still sat untouched in his bag. Ms. Caldwell didn't mention it. Instead, she handed him a sealed envelope. "This," she said, "is your next step. If you're serious." "I haven't even opened the first one," he said. "That's your decision," she replied. He scoffed. "This some kind of game?" She met his gaze without flinching. "No. This is work. The kind you've never had to do, Because people like me have been doing it for you. Her tone wasn't bitter, just honest. That night, Preston finally opened the folder. Inside, a single black and white photo, an elderly man in a worn-out suit sitting on a bus bench. One name printed below, Hollis Dent. On the back, one instruction. Find him. Listen. No phone. No recordings. Just a notebook and ears that are finally open. He wasn't ready for what Hollis Dent would tell him, or how it would land harder than any lecture. That Saturday, Preston didn't ask for the usual ride. No driver. No Escalade. No tinted windows or comfort. He took the city bus instead. Transferred twice. His final stop left him in South DeKalb, Georgia. No designer coffee shops, no trendy murals. Just sun-scorched buildings and sidewalks with stories. He walked 3 blocks and saw it, the bench from the photo. And there he was. Same suit. Same posture. Same quiet power. Hollis Dent. 84 years old. Skin weathered like tree bark, eyes sharp like glass. Preston hesitated. Mr. Dent. The man didn't move. You the boy Nain sent? Preston blinked. Yeah, I guess. Don't guess. You are, or you ain't. I am them are. Dent finally looked up. Sit. He sat. No greetings. No small talk. Silence. Then you ever been called boy by a grown man who knows your name? Preston shifted. Not really. I have, Mr. Dent said. 53 times before I turned 16. 38 of those by men in uniform. Preston didn't respond. I marched with King once, he continued. Only once. Took a baton to the ribs. Didn't march again, but I didn't stop fighting. I just got smarter. Started organizing from the inside. Preston leaned in, his curiosity finally outweighing his ego. Ms. Caldwell said I should listen. Mr. Dent smirked. Did she now? That woman's got more truth in her pinky than most folks have in their whole body. He squinted. You messed with her, didn't you? Preston lowered his eyes. Didn't think she'd actually do anything, he muttered. Mr. Dent's laugh came slow and raspy. She didn't lecture him. She led him, step by step, into the weight of a history he'd never dared to carry. And what he found there didn't just teach him, it unraveled him. She never raised her voice, but she raised something far more powerful, the truth. And this time, he didn't run from it. Mr. Dent let out a dry laugh. She didn't have to punish you. She sent me. He reached into his coat and carefully unfolded an aged paper, yellowed at the edges, almost translucent. An old newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local teen wins state debate, demands black authors in curriculum. The image was blurry, but unmistakable. 17-year-old Nain, thick glasses, fierce stare. She's been fighting this fight longer than you've been breathing, boy. Preston traced his fingers over the photo. She's different. No, Mr. Dent corrected. You're just used to teachers who let you slide. She's not one of them. They sat for almost 2 hours. Mr. Dent told him about his mother, fired after speaking up at a PTA meeting. About walking 5 miles to a school that buses skipped. About the sound of chains and holding cells where he and 50 others were thrown just for sitting at a lunch counter. History, he said, ain't for tests. It's something you carry, in your back, in your blood, whether you want to or not. When Preston left, the folder felt heavier than when he came. That Monday, he arrived early. Ms. Caldwell was already at the board. Preston gently placed the old clipping on her desk, like it was sacred. She turned. No words. Just a nod. Not approval, acknowledgement. He took his seat. When the bell rang, she taught like always. No mention of the visit. But on his desk lay a new envelope. Smaller. Just one line on the front. Birmingham, Alabama. Civil Rights Institute. Saturday, 10:30 a.m. This wouldn't be another bench conversation. What waited for him next would dismantle walls he didn't even know he'd built. The Greyhound ride was 3 hours. His dad offered the jet. Even the Bentley. Preston refused. He didn't want luxury. He wanted silence. Distance. Maybe even a little invisibility. He arrived just after 10. The sun was already blazing against the stone steps of the Civil Rights Institute. A guard led him to a side entrance. Someone had clearly been waiting. Inside, the air was cool. Heavy with memory. The walls whispered. The photos watched him back. Ms. Caldwell met him near the main exhibit. No clipboard. No teacher mode. Just jeans, a blue shirt, and a crossbody bag. You're here, she said. I am. This isn't a tour. It's not for credit. No grades, I get it. She studied him once, then turned and walked. He followed. They passed the original jail door from Birmingham City Jail, where Dr. King wrote letter from a Birmingham jail. The air tightened. They stopped in front of a glass case. A single burned church shoe sat inside. Ms. Caldwell didn't speak. Preston read the plaque. Addie Mae Collins, age 14. Victim of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing, September 15, 1963. He stared at the shoe, not for shock, but because it was so small. So normal. So real. How old was she? He asked. 14. He looked away. They moved on. More names. More faces. Emmett Till. Viola Liuzzo. Medgar Evers. Bayard Rustin. Each one with a voice. A heartbeat. A history. This, Ms. Caldwell said, softly, is what you joked about. I didn't know. Preston whispered. No. You didn't want to know. They entered the movement gallery. Fire hoses slammed into crowds on screen. Dogs lunged. Protesters were thrown, beaten, silenced. Then came a video. A black woman, older, speaking calmly into the camera. Preston watched. She spoke of trying to enroll her son in an all-white school in 1961. Of walking past crowds that spat and screamed. Of gripping her child's hand while shielding him with her own body. Preston turned slowly. That was you. Ms. Caldwell nodded. Why didn't you tell the class? Because they don't need my trauma to understand truth. But you needed to. They stood quietly. For the first time since transferring, Preston wasn't performing. He wasn't mocking or disengaged, he was present. She handed him a small notebook. Blank. Lined. What's this? Start writing. Everything. Questions. Feelings. Lies you've told yourself. Things you never thought to ask. He held it like it might fall apart. I've never done this before. That's exactly why you need to. They sat outside afterward. She sipped tea from a thermos. He opened the notebook. Just stared at the page and then, finally, he wrote, I used to think history was boring because it wasn't about me, he wrote. Then, beneath it. But maybe it always was. Maybe I just didn't want to see how. He didn't show Ms. Caldwell. Not yet. On the bus ride home, Preston didn't scroll, didn't check his reflection. He looked out. Really looked. The graffiti on a bridge felt louder now. A mural of John Lewis seemed to speak directly to him. A street sign with a name he'd never noticed before made him wonder. Who was that? What did they survive to deserve a street? He opened the notebook again and wrote. 3 full pages before Alabama even faded behind him. That Monday, he walked into class 5 minutes early. Can I read something? He asked. The room fell quiet. Even Ms. Caldwell paused, her head tilted. Preston stood, pulled out the notebook, and began. I used to think I was better than the people in the stories we read, because I had money. Options. But now I see, they didn't need money. They were the lesson. And I was too proud to learn it. No one said a word. Not because they didn't care, because they could tell he finally did. But he wasn't finished. That Friday, her classroom was full before the first bell. Word had spread. Students who weren't even in her class leaned against the walls, waiting. They'd all heard. Preston Kavanaugh had something to say. He stood at the front, one folded page in one hand, his notebook in the other. No slideshow. No performative charm. Just Preston. I didn't write a paper, he said. I wrote something else. Ms. Caldwell sat at her desk, hands folded. Not judging. Just present. He looked around. I used to think I knew everything. I didn't. He opened the notebook and read. When I walked into the school, I thought I was doing all of you a favor. I thought public school meant soft rules and teachers who wouldn't care. Then I met Ms. Caldwell. She didn't yell. She didn't punish. She invited. She gave me a chance to listen to voices I'd never heard. To meet people I'd never think to meet. Mr. Hollis then told me about the day he stopped marching, because a cop broke his ribs with a baton. He told me, "This is history, not the kind you read. The kind you live. The kind you bleed." At the Civil Rights Institute, I saw a burned shoe. It belonged to Addie Mae. She was 14 when she died in a bombing. And I realized, my joke about slavery. That wasn't a joke. That was me proving how little I knew. I was scared. Scared to admit how much I didn't understand. But once Ms. Caldwell made me look, once you see, you can't unsee. He paused. The room was still. Even the usual loudmouths were silent. He looked up. I used to think power meant being the loudest. But it's not. Real power? It's listening. And letting it change you. He folded the page, tucked it in the back of the notebook, and sat down. Still no clapping. Not because it didn't matter, because they weren't ready to let go of the moment. Ms. Caldwell stood. Walked to the front. Her eyes scanned the class, not just Preston. "What you just witnessed," she said, "is growth. Not perfection. Not redemption. Just a step. And sometimes, that's enough." Then she turned to Preston. "Come. Even. You showed us it's never too late to learn. But now comes the hard part." He tilted his head. "What's that living it?" And just like that, she turned to the board, started writing that day's lesson like nothing life-changing had just happened. The rest of the class followed. But a few looked at Preston differently now. Not as the rich kid with a smart mouth, but as someone who had finally gone quiet long enough to hear. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. The final bell rang. Backpacks zipped. Desks scraped. Laughter rushed out of the room like a wave. Preston didn't move, he waited. Caldwell erased the board. Slow and steady he walked to her desk. Notebook in hand, without looking up, she said, "You did what I asked." "That matters. I didn't come for credit," he replied. That made her pause. She looked up. "That I came to say thank you." She sat. Folded her hands. That was brave. Preston shook his head. "No. It was late. It should have come sooner. You were raised to think you were already done learning." He met her eyes. "Firm, I'm not done. I know that now." She gave him a small, almost tired smile. "Then you're ahead of most adults I know." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was earned. He pulled out a sheet of paper. Laid it on her desk. It was a copy of the newspaper photo, the 17-year-old version of her, glasses and all. Beneath it, he had written, "Thank you for fighting for a classroom that could hold both truth and grace." She read it. Took her time. Folded it carefully. Then she looked at him. "You've still got a lot of work to do." "I know," he said. "Not everyone's going to forgive you as quickly as this room did." "I don't expect them to." "Good." She stood. Walked to the window. Watched the parking lot fill with kids heading into their weekends. Then, without turning around, she said, "Go earn it, Preston. With your life. Not just your words." He didn't reply. He just nodded, turned, and walked out, this time with both feet on the ground. Because the best apologies aren't spoken. They're lived. And sometimes, the person who teaches you the most isn't the one who shouts, but the one who refuses to lower the bar, just to keep you comfortable. If this story made you pause, ask yourself, who in your life has been trying to teach you something you weren't ready to hear? Maybe it's time to listen. And if you're the one teaching, do it like Ms. Caldwell, patient, firm, and unforgettable.